You're listening to the Property Management Excellence Podcast for insights that drive rapid rental growth.
Welcome back. Good to have you with us. PMX, I'm Alex Whitlock. I'm co-founder of Managed. I'm also a director of REB. I love doing this podcast. It gives me an opportunity to not only to meet and to talk to people that have incredible insights into how real estate is being shaped at the forefront. It also gives me an opportunity to, I guess, to explore my own theories and my own ideas. Now, I've got very firm ideas around the customer proposition, and I talk about it very regularly on this podcast. I'm a landlord. I've been a customer property manager for many, many years. But one of the things that I don't know and I have no experience in is some of the structural things around PM. Now, I don't normally go into this because, as I say, it's outside of my wheelhouse, but I'm really pleased to be joined by somebody that I know has an exceptional grasp on how to structure and how to build a very, very dynamic business. You may have heard me talk before about H&B. It's an agency down in Melbourne. I've had the pleasure of joining the principal, Tim Harris, up at ARIC. We did a joint session looking at the PM and the landlord relationship, which we thoroughly enjoyed. Today, I've got somebody else from H&B that's been really there since the foundation of what is an explosive property management business. I'm really pleased to welcome onto the show a gentleman called Tim Oldenburg, who heads up property management there and has been really pivotal in that relationship. Tim, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks for having me.
Well, I have to have you on, Tim, because you changed my life as an investor.
How did I change it?
But so you changed my life as an investor quite genuinely when I sent you an email because you were looking after a very poor performing property, as you would probably remember, which we've now sold. And by coincidence, I just, you guys took that property over. It was managed not very well by another agent. And then being focused on the Melbourne market and thinking I was a better investor than I actually am, which is what most investors do, I thought I found myself a gem of a 2-bedroom apartment in Carlton, and I'd already negotiated a price with the agent. I sent you an email saying, "Oh, look, I'm going to buy this apartment. I'd like to put it on your rent roll with you." And I just asked you that final thing at the bottom. I went, "What do you think?" And your response genuinely has changed my journey as an investor, and also my journey with yourself and your partner Tim Harris. So that's important you're on the show today, Tim.
I appreciate it. Actually, back then, it took me like almost an hour to reply to your message because the German I am, I was like feeling straight away saying, well, Alex, that is a bad investment. But I wanted to write it a little bit nicer and give you, an easy way of saying like, well, it's maybe not the best investment. But I mean, I was actually very pleased that you called me straight away and that you listened to my advice as well. That was very positive and very good as well.
So the thing is, and I want to just dwell on this before we get into the incredible things you've done operationally, but this is so critical to me as an owner because it highlights the fact, even though I've been buying property for 30 years, I've been an investor for a long time. I don't know, I might think I know how to invest and where to invest and what looks like a good investment. I can tell you that 2-bedder in Carlton, for me, with circa 5.2% yield, looked like it was a better yielding property than anything I'd got at the time. But this is a critical thing where I think a lot of the opportunity lies in the relationship between the owner and the property manager, is that you had, I won't even go so far as saying the courage. It's hardwired into you to give me an honest response. I asked you what you thought. You gave me a very honest response. And I didn't know that you took time to think about it, but you were very direct. And then the conversation that we had led to me not buying that 5.2% yield property to, I think, the first one that I bought with you and with Tim, which was actually on your rent roll. So it was a win-win, right? Because you retain it on your rent roll. I got 7.8% yield with that property, and I suspect we'll probably be able to increase that to the next review at the end of this year. So just before we get into the operational stuff, Tim, just tell me, and our relationship has really grown since then. It wasn't before then. I don't think we'd even spoken before then.
Probably only like when we signed the authority before then.
Yeah, a handful of times.
That was like maybe 2-minute chat or so, but no.
Have you had that kind of interaction with other owners before or after?
I would say I had it once or twice with owners, but I would say you are the only one so far who actually asked for advice and generally is interested. What I have to say or what an agent has to say. Often what you get is like, oh yeah, I'm gonna buy this property, and basically everyone sort of knows already they're set on this property and they want to buy it. And if you give a negative feedback, it's often not perceived that well. But usually I would say I maybe have a similar relationship with one or two other clients, that they trust what I say. But I would say, generally speaking, it's more like, not on that level. Yeah.
Well, what you said was not only exactly accurate, but of enormous value to me as an owner. Anyway, we're not here to talk about
exactly.
And to share that I did a podcast with Tim, and I've now bought 6 properties with you. Whether with you directly or whether with Tim. Some on your rent roll. One on your rent roll, one that you had that Tim had as a selling agent. The other ones Tim's helped me find just in the local area, and it's a win-win thing because you obviously grow your rent roll by 6 properties, and I have great investments.
And it's as well properties what we like, and it's not necessarily like buildings or so which we are not necessarily fans of, because obviously anything what we throw to you, we basically say, well, that's a good investment, and also like we don't have any headaches. So it's a win-win definitely for everyone.
Win. But the reason why I wanted, particularly Tim, to have you on the show is to really give some insight into areas where I don't have experience and I'm not confident to talk. But I've watched your agency grow at an incredible pace. And before we get into it, it would be good to give our listeners a bit of an insight into you yourself, because you're not from a property management background per se. So a quick introduction to how you ended up working in property management would be great.
Look, I mean, I come obviously originally from Germany, as you can hear with my accent. Did a finance and marketing degree over there in Germany. Worked a little bit in finance during my studies. Decided Germany or the finance market over there was not necessarily for me. Had the opportunity to come to Australia, help Tim Harris building the business H&B, or basically at this stage it was like really just a very small family-run business. I think when I first joined it was 50, 60 properties only managed. And then I basically had to adapt a little bit, because I had obviously all these business courses in my head and all this, what you do with budgets and everything. And then I was thrown in a very tiny business and had to really adapt and learn the entire industry by hand. Like I did property management, everything. I did the routines, I did maintenance, I did everything. I helped with Tim in sales, obviously, but I'm definitely not the usual person entering the real estate market, I would say, because I just came because I had the chance to build a business with Tim Harris, and that's why I joined this company. But I just had to learn everything from the very bottom and had to learn it all by myself. So,
and oftentimes, Tim, again, I look to my own business. So, yes, Managed is a business that we've run for sort of around 8 years, but I've been in business an awful lot longer than that. I've grown and built a very significant media business from scratch, from 2 people to 200 people. And I've had a philosophy in media, and particularly in and around sales, where I liked to hire people with no media sales experience, because I would find that they would have all sorts of bad habits, all sorts of preconceived ideas about how to sell media. So I've grown businesses. There are some things you have to have people, right? Journalists, you can't have somebody who doesn't understand journalism writing news for any particular audience. But in some areas, you can have talented people that are not necessarily experienced in a particular field. And what you get with H&B and with yourself is somebody with very significant, somebody who's academic and has been very well educated, who can apply a business strategy to an area where often there isn't a lot of structure and business strategy applied. And this is why you guys have grown. Just give us a quick snapshot from you started when there were 50 properties on the agency, and I know that Tim is a sales agent. Tell me a little bit about where H&B is now.
Well, we are now just above 1,000 rental properties. So obviously we have grown since then quite significantly. Really, we only started growing 3 years ago. So 2023 is basically when the starting point was where we started growing significantly. Before then, the first 2 years was probably a learning curve as well for me, and learning my trade as well in the industry, helping to understand the business of Tim, because, coming from university, I had like these big marketing plans. Oh yeah, you just need to pump 10,000 here, you do this and this. Then I look at the cash flow and go like, you don't have $10,000. Okay, you need to find different methods, So it probably took me 2 years to understand the Australian market in general as well, because obviously it's a complete different market to Germany, what I'm used to as well, rental market and everything. So, but yeah, from there just went the last 3 years, we just grow, and seems to keep going. I mean, it was literally just Tim, Anna, his wife, and me at the beginning, and now we have, I believe, 11 staff members. So, it's going well for us.
And I'm interested to know what came first. Was it growth and then realization you could grow more, or was it no, we want to grow and we're gonna form a strategy around that?
Well, I guess probably the main goal was you just want to, you want the cash flow to be healthy, like you don't want to depend on sales, which obviously I assume most smaller agents would have, if it's especially what I saw with Tim and Anna, husband-wife combination. Anna was doing rentals, Tim was doing the sales. Well, they really just depend on the sales really coming in. So yeah, for us, it was just like, you need to secure the cash flow, and you don't want to have the fear, of not being able to pay bills or have a good lifestyle, I guess. So that was basically the main driving part at the beginning, where we were like, okay, we need to change something. We need to do things slightly different to what the market was. And that happened to be like mainly the systems. I mean, Tim changed to manage 8 years ago, I believe, or 7 years ago. And that was like the first stepping stone, I guess, to make systems easier, to make property management easier for us. But since then, we just had to adjust more and more systems to, I guess, streamline the process, make the experience for both landlords, tenants, but also property managers easier. Yeah. And also cost effective, because obviously we are talking about an industry where, we're not talking about that you get paid each month $1,000 or whatever. We're talking about small margins. So you need to be very careful not to overcapitalize, and you just have everything run efficiently.
So this is a really key point, Tim, because at the end of the day, I think you can view real estate as people, you've got sales agents that go in and then they go and launch their own office, and it's kind of what they do, and they live off their commissions, and maybe they have an also ran with property management, but they don't view it from a business perspective first. Of course, they want to make money out of it, but it's a bit more of a fingers crossed and let's hope, rather than, taking a strategic business view. For the very brief amount of time that I've been through the privilege of working at Managed and working with our customers and talking to people who don't necessarily come onto the platform, understanding the whole ecosystem, I'm just unbelievably excited about the huge business potential in and around property management, cash flow management, structurally looking at, as you say, working off thin margins, but to do it effectively and to look at building a valuable asset. And you guys have clearly got the bit between your teeth in terms of that approach. I think that I've seen through observing the business you've built, what a huge opportunity there is for PM to be not just a valuable addition to a sales business, but really be the central driver of revenue and of income.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, for us, the main thing was definitely like that whatever is built in the rental needs to stay with the business, and you don't necessarily want to heavily depend on anyone, on me, on Anna, on Tim, or whoever it was. So basically the last 2 years, at the beginning, I was managing a lot of the clients personally. I would be basically their property manager and would take everyone's phone calls, and everyone loved me. But I saw a massive issue with that. It's like everyone loves me, but they also depend too much on me, So I was afterwards building a system where you still service everyone to a high standard, but not necessarily make them all just loving me and not the company, because that, I believe, is the dangerous thing. If you then, for example, hire a property manager and they may be awesome at their job, but, if they manage it for 2-3 years and for whatever reasons they move on because life happened, and they just go to a different company, well, then who is managing those clients? Because they were really building a relationship with this property manager and not with your business. So, yeah, that was a key point.
I'm going to take a quick break here, Tim, because when I come back, I'd like to actually dive a little bit deeper into that and to look at the evolution from sort of a 3-person team into building structure and how you've gone about doing that and what you're learning along the way. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back in a couple of seconds. Welcome back. Great to have you with us. Alex Whitlock with you. Tim Oldenburg from H&B. We are getting pretty deeply into how one of the most successful businesses I've had the privilege of coming into contact with have grown and scaled. Just a quick snapshot. When Tim joined the business a few years ago, 50 properties under management. From 2003, really sort of had a big initiative to grow the business. Now at over 1,000, and I know that there are plans for the business to go well beyond that. So, Tim, just coming back to sort of where we left off before the break, I think you said something that will resonate with a lot of people, that you were the everything on the property management side, all your customers, all of the owners, investors, and I'm sure tenants got to know you and got to like you. And having been a customer of yours, I don't work with you directly now. Alex looks after me, but yes, I can understand why your customers like you, because you're direct and you're accountable and you're very honest and very clear, and that's important in real estate. So now, how, as you started to scale the business, if you could just give me a bit of an insight into structurally how you've got it organized now. So, is how departmentalized are you? Who does what tasks? How have you got it structured?
Well, I mean, that is probably the biggest task or the most challenging task if you're like smaller and you want to scale, because I honestly believe, I haven't done every single task. The traditional model that a property manager does everything doesn't work. Like, I noticed it with myself. I was great with numbers. You can ask me about rent increase values, sales values, finance, throw it at me. As soon as it came to the emotional side, which definitely is as well sometimes needed with tenants, with nurturing or whatever, with owners as well, because in theory we are that as well to these clients, I was not as good. Whereas like I could see other team members were great at that. And then when it came to exit inspections or so, I was okay, but there are other people who were much more detailed, much more precise, just much better. So you can definitely, well, it's just normal. There are different skill sets. And I just believe always that like one person can't be great at everything. It's better to split the departments. So that is
picking up on that, Tim, and thank you for that. It's an insight I'm sure that many will resonate with. So you've got a balance of the number of properties that you have on your rent roll. So if I've got 15 properties on my rent roll, guess what? I'm going to be doing everything. And there's going to be a point where I'm going to need to do everything, because unless I've got some plan which is going to deliver, sort of 40, 50 pound a month, I'm going to have to go. So what was the tipping point for you in terms of the size of the rent roll where you were able to start to shape it around different skills for different tasks?
Well, it just depends obviously on the AMFs, how much you actually can get, because obviously for certain areas you just get like a lower annual management fee, or in other areas you get higher. Probably Sydney, the numbers would be, you don't need to manage as many properties, whereas Melbourne, the annual management fees are relatively low compared to, let's say, Sydney. So I would say we probably needed 200 rentals to justify doing it, but basically making the decision, we do it now, but we're not making a cent out of it, sort of, because but because we had the growth plan, and that we just basically, okay, if we want to keep going and growing, I can't rely on just, one person doing everything, because then I'll just go back now to that. Actually, we had a team member, and that broke my heart back then. She was doing 200 properties. She was amazing. She was doing everything. I was only doing the leasing side, and she was doing everything else. The owners loved her and everything as well. So, but unfortunately, she decided she moves out of the industry, goes somewhere else, life.
Yeah.
But that was definitely like sort of a turning point for me. Like, I don't want that. I don't want like that people depend too heavily on this one person, So that's where it really came to me, like, you need to have really departments structured.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm still friends with her, and she basically told me afterwards the main reason why she decided to leave after a year or 1.5 years in the industry was that she just couldn't cope with doing it all, doing the tenants, doing the maintenance, doing finance parts, and and you're always, as our director says, you are the meat between the sandwich. So it's like it was just too much. She burned out of it, and it was just not enough pleasure for her in it. So that's why we had to basically separate different roles, so that your focus point is on this, and you get great at this job. But we needed really 200 rentals to make the decision to at least cover the wages, and that not making money out of it. But yeah,
there's a couple of really, thank you for that, and I'm sure that that's a great scenario. You were forced in some ways through losing somebody who was highly valued and highly liked, and then need to restructure. But you said something else that was really important as well. It was that at the time when you made the decision to do that restructuring, it cost money, but you had the vision, and this is what I want to tap into through the PMX podcast, is a growth mindset and growth infrastructure, and that was at 200. You're now 5 times that size. So having the ability and the insight, and having a principal, by the way, as well, who shared your vision for potential in this marketplace, has allowed you and worked with you to say, okay, well, we're not going to make any money out of property management, but we're building infrastructure where we can go from 200 to 1,000. And that's a really critical thing. So who was the next hire then, Tim, after this lady left?
Actually, Alex, the one who's looking after you, he joined. Basically, he was the next, and since then we just hired basically every month a couple more people. So
what's Alex's role now?
So Alex is basically, he was just doing the PM work, basically. So how we have split it so that most people understand it, it's just like we have a leasing department. I was mainly doing that for a while. And then there was the PM department. So we called them relationship managers. So basically, they would communicate mostly with the clients. So in this case, Alex was in that role. And he would, for example, if there was a maintenance issue or whatever, he would call you, Alex, and go like, hey, this issue, Alex, are you okay for me to go ahead, or send you the email, whatever it is. And he would handle that side. And my sole job was basically increasing the value of the list. So that's also very important. Like often when we took over rental properties from a different agency and a property manager was doing everything, the first thing what they're not doing is doing rent increases, just simply because, well, you have to think about it. If you increase the rents too high, there is an exit inspection, there are opens, there's always conflict when the tenant leaves regarding the bond and everything. So often, from what I've seen, at least in Victoria, people avoid doing it just to keep the tenants and just
keep it ticking over.
Which is fair enough. If you do it everything, I understand it fully. Like if you have 150 properties to look after and you need to do everything, and you need to then have opens as well, exits, it's a big job. So for us, it was important that in this case, when we did the change, that Alex, you handle the clients when it comes to the maintenance side, you look after that. And I basically make sure that the value of the business keeps going up by basically having on the other side once a year, I would have a conversation with you, Alex, and would say, hey, rent increase potentially to this and this level. Would you like to do it? Yes, perfect. Rent increase set. If the tenants leave, I personally don't care necessarily, as long as I'm confident that obviously you can get the higher rent. It's good for the business. It's good for you as the landlord anyways. That is probably the main reason why we have succeeded, because we would get properties that are heavily undervalued just because other agents just didn't want to increase it for that exact reason, because they don't want to have the conflict with end of lease and, it's being dirty. There's this defect, maybe potential VCAT or like bond claim issues. So that is probably why we have succeeded so much, because there are so many agents, and I completely understand why they not do it, but they basically avoid raising the rents just so that they don't have the extra workload, the potential extra workload. It's not always even the case.
We're going to take a quick break, and I think this lines this up really quite nicely, Tim, for what I'd like to just touch on in the last section. You've grown the agency with, I think, with incredible skill, yourself and Tim and the rest of the team. You've grown organically, but you've also grown through acquisition, and it would be good to get just some of your insights and some of your experiences and what you've learned along the way, going down the acquisition path. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back in a couple of seconds. Welcome back. Alex Whitlock, Tim Oldenburg with you, PMX. This has been a really valuable podcast for me. I've talked to Tim many times. Tim's been very much instrumental in helping me on my own investment journey, but I've learned even through having a chance to talk to Tim in this podcast format about some of the structural things that H&B has applied. I know Tim Harris very well. Tim is a sales agent by trade, and I know that as time has gone by, how much Tim Harris has valued Tim Oldenburg's input and insight into the business. And again, just to recap, Tim Oldenburg is not from a traditional property management background. Highly educated, very clear in his thinking. I know Tim Tim Oldenburg very well. German, very straight talking, backs himself in his decisions, and it's been a formula that's been very successful for H&B. With working with Tim Harris, Tim, over the last several years, you've gone down a path which some agencies go down, but not many, around acquisition. From my experience and in the anecdotal conversations I had with you, you've been extremely effective at this, and you've applied the way you're wired, a business structured approach to acquisition, and you've used your German thoroughness, from conversations we've had, to really take quite an exceptional view to actually looking at the assets that you're purchasing. What have you learned as you've gone along the way? And tell me a little bit about your sort of philosophy around making acquisitions in the rent roll space.
Well, I mean, obviously you can't just grow just organically. I mean, you need to acquire as well. I mean, if you want to grow in a quick fashion, I mean, there's no chance without going either the one way that you hire 5 or 6 sales agents, but they maybe generate, extra business, but you need to go either way. Either you do this path, you have a bigger sales team that brings in rentals, or you acquire. So we obviously decided, okay, we can acquire a rental and see how we go. So acquiring a rental is interesting, especially when you do it for the first time. I have to say it is scary. Obviously, I'm not the director, so in the end, it was more scary for Tim Harris because
a lot at stake.
He is the one signing it. I'm in the end just the one doing the due diligence. But I think it's actually not a difficult thing if you do it right, if you just do the job. The only thing is you need to pick the right list, and you need to see as well potential red flags just literally before you even sign a contract or before you do the due diligence, and just avoid those traps, because they are definitely it's for us, it was always smooth, but I think we prepared ourselves well enough, but there are definitely as well
but I
dodgy
think
ways.
again, knowing you and having your foundations in finance, that yes, you've understand, you've learned, you've worked very hard at the coalface to understand property management, but you also bring to the table a degree of rigor.
Yeah.
And in terms of making acquisitions, this is really kind of what you're built for.
Yeah, oh, no, definitely. Like, I mean, it's actually fascinates me every single time you talk to a rent roll broker, because obviously it's just basically another sales agent having the listings, and you ask, oh, can I get the information? You basically organize, then sign everything, agree with the vendor, that's fine. Then it comes to the due diligence, and the amount of times you get asked, oh, how many documents do you even want to see? How many properties do you want to look at? I'm like, I want to see everything, every single file. And people go like, oh, but usually out of 100, they just want to see 10, as an example. I'm like, yeah, but I want to see everything. Like, that is definitely the one thing I would say. If someone was to buy a rent roll, you need to see everything. You need to see every compliance certificate. You need to see every ledger. You need to see any authority, any lease agreements, any rent increase notices. I know it's like, I mean, even for myself, I love numbers and everything. It's a lot, but you need to see these sort of things. And I mean, I go through these documents like 4, 5, 6 times, even past due diligence, entering it into a system, and, just basically not just trusting that things go the right way. You just need to literally double check everything. But I think that is probably the only challenge acquiring like this, because, I mean, Tim Harris and I, we are basically completely different. I'm very much an introverted person. He's an extroverted people person, always talking. So he looks at numbers and he goes like, I don't want to see it. So if someone is inclined like Tim, I would say, do not bother buying a rent roll, because then it probably backfires. Or if you're just a salesperson and you don't necessarily love the numbers, I would say it's probably not the best fit to buy a rent roll. I think if you do it, you need to really commit to it and basically have someone, or maybe a partner like Tim and I just focus on the rental side. I just focus on these sort of things because I like it. You can't really force like a salesperson, like Tim Harris in this case, to look at these sort of documents. He would literally run the other way. So my
business partner, Phil Tarrant, is operationally minded. We've made numerous acquisitions in our media business, and Phil, like you, goes through every single document, every single line item. And often the businesses that we've bought are very different to a rent roll, but you're still buying a business and you're buying a business with a view to making money, right? You're not buying a business to lose money. And so exactly. Phil will go through every single granular bit of detail. And in the acquisitions that we've made, quite often, they're usually being sold when they're a little bit rusty around the edges and somebody's fallen out of love with them. So we've made acquisitions where we've been able to gain significant value because Phil, as he's gone through every granular bit, he's found revenue that they didn't realize was there. He's found little bits they're trying to hide. And that means the price comes down. And if you're making an acquisition, analyzing the numbers is so critical because you're going to wear it if you're using your instinct to purchase something and your instincts are wrong, you're going to be down, you're going to be losing money.
Yeah, like I think the instinct, you can't be like the measurement stick when it comes to, signing like obviously big financial commitments like this, like a rental purchase, or like, as you say, any business acquisition is like, you really want to know what you're buying, because as soon as you put your name or your money into it, you want to know what you're buying.
So what are some of the things that, as you've gone through this process, Tim, as you've dragged the people selling and the brokers through your process, not following their process, what are some of the things what are some of the key things you've noticed as you've gone through this process?
Well, I mean, it's always like a little bit of a battle that you basically force them in a way that you have access to the documents. And sometimes other agents don't necessarily want you to have the documents, and you go like, well, if you're really serious on selling, I get these documents anyways as soon as, everything settles. So I need to see the documents. So that is basically the main challenge, that other agents don't necessarily, like the selling agents, don't necessarily want to show you everything. And that could be just maybe they don't trust you, or they just basically don't trust their own files necessarily. As you say, like when someone decides to sell a rental, I would say most of the time it's either it makes no money for them, or they just,
they've lost interest.
They lost interest, or they're just sick of it, which probably most of the times when we acquired was because they would hire a property manager, and the property manager would stay there for 5-6 years, manage everything for them. And then this property manager leaves, and they would need to find the one replacement for this one person. And they don't even want to do that. So they just decide, I sell it all.
And I just I'm picking up on something you said earlier. And on that basis, Tim, with the one property manager doing everything, you'd said at the beginning of the podcast, the last thing they want to do is to look at market rentals. And so have you found that there's times where you've acquired a rent roll and that there is an adjustment upward in rentals once you've acquired?
There's definitely, like with the ones that I'm looking at, I always look for that, because otherwise I wouldn't necessarily buy a list, because there are definitely agents out there who do their job very well and then sell the rental. Potentially, they just increase everything 12 months before to the maximum, and then they sell the rental, a bit like this. If you go to the stock exchange and you want to get the highest price, some agents do that. Others, I've focused,
and as you said, they might have built, and it's interesting, because the business we look at value, we look at the opportunity to add value, but the bones of a business is good. So whenever we acquire, so there's got to be good lists, but with out of date pricing on them, and people say and I think looking at the reasons why people are selling, because the PM who's been there for 6 years has now left, and it's just too hard, or they maybe have grown organically but haven't changed their infrastructure to help them grow further. So,
but it's also always important to see who is the vendor, and obviously you find it out during the due diligence as well, because what is important when you buy a rental, obviously, if I would buy now a rental, the vendor would have to say to, let's say you are the client, would send an assignment of authority, which is 14 days prior to the settlement. You would receive that notice. So you have a chance to just go away and go with the own agent you want. So what is very important is that you just basically say, okay, whatever you buy, you definitely don't want that the previous agent had a great relationship necessarily with the client, because it would be probably very difficult now if I was to sell you to John Smith down the road. You have a good relationship with me, and you maybe go to this other person, test them out for 4 or 5 months, and if you're not happy, you leave. So it's always great if you see that a list is potentially in the old structured way, that property manager is up to 400 properties. Sometimes they manage one single person and does everything. So that can't go well. These lists are though perfect, because okay, this property manager won't take a phone call for 2 or 3 days of this landlord. So if you literally just answer the phone an hour maybe after the landlord rang, you look like Jesus Christ to them. So that is basically the recipe, I think, for anyone. If you're looking at acquiring, I don't think buying a perfect looking list is the best, at the highest price. It's probably better to look at something that is still good. As you say, the bones are there, but it's not it's not perfectly executed, let's say it like this.
But Tim, this is the essence though, where there's two things, right? Well, there's a number of things in property management. There's doing property management, maintenance and leasing and compliance. That's the doing, right? And let's just park that, because every job has the doing. There's the way that I see property management is there's kind of 3 elements to it. There's the doing of property management. Let's just not worry about that. There's owner engagement and understanding the customer. And I think a lot of agencies don't do that well. But the third thing is the business of property management, which you do exceptionally. And I think if you've got enough about you to have a very business focused structural view of what you're doing, looking at cash flow and ability to grow, then you can start to look at, if you're looking through acquisition, you can start to consider value. What state is this rent roll in? Is there an upside on the rentals? Is there going to be, friction because, some loved PM and some loved kind of agency is going to be gone, and is that going to mean attrition? And I think that, what H&B has done and continues to do so well is the business of property management. And of course, you do the other elements well, but you're a business focused partnership. And I think that's very clear in the success you've had. Just before we close off, Tim, you're at 1,000 now. What's the future look like for H&B? What do you expect?
Well, I would be disappointed if we don't have 3,000 in 5 years. So, we aim for that. Hopefully we achieve it earlier than that. But, it's just obviously subject to so many things, because obviously you can't predict the future necessarily, but we should be somewhere around that number.
But you can certainly have a plan around replicating past successes.
Look, that's why the system I've built now, it's obviously quite unique, but it's not depending too much anymore on a single person, not on me, not on Tim, not on anyone, because the most important thing is that the business operates without any person, like your property manager can be today Alex, tomorrow it is someone else. But the service you receive is still the same, that is my key thing. Like, obviously, as you said, like everyone needs to understand in our agency, the landlord is the client. Like, you are the one who's paying the bill. And as much as obviously we need to comply with all the standards and everything, that's a given. But I can't be necessarily too much on the side of the tenant, because if I'm too focused on the tenant, and you are unhappy, you just leave, and then I can't help the tenant either, because I'm no longer the manager. So I think that is probably what we do as well, very clear. We want that everyone is treated fair and well, but in the end, we always need to remember that the landlord is the one who's paying the bills, and they are the client. And if they are not with us, first of all, we don't have any business, but also we can't help the tenants or tradies or whoever it is. Yeah.
Tim, I think it's been a really, really inspirational podcast, and I'm very grateful for you taking time to catch up. And I also know that you're not somebody who likes to be in the limelight, as you say. No. But I think you've really delivered really valuable content. And for me, H&B is the embodiment of what I see as being a next-gen agency. Incredible service. You understand the ecosystem, the value of making sure tenants are well looked after and in good property. And I know the properties that I've secured with you, I haven't had to listen to Alex because there's been no maintenance, because you've buy properties with no issues. You also understand the relationship with the customer and who the customer is. And without a landlord, there is no business. And I think that there's a lot of agencies, not necessarily from a principal point of view, but that the PMs become so fatigued that they sit there behind text or by email. And I understand the reality of that. But you guys, Alex gets in touch with me. I know who he is. I've obviously, sort of had you on the phone as and when. But I think above all, you're growth focused. You're a business. You're not just a property manager, and you don't necessarily view yourselves as property manager. Property management is the business that you're in, but you're a growth business, and you understand cash flow and building an asset. And I look forward to seeing the stories you guys move forward.
I'm looking forward to it too. I hope there's more to come.
Thank you, Tim. And for everyone else, thank you so much for joining us. Love having you listening to the show. Do please keep listening. We'll be with you next week.
The information featured in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into consideration your financial situation or individual needs, and should not be relied upon. Before making any investment, insurance, tax, property, or financial planning decision, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you. Guests appearing on this podcast may have a commercial relationship with the companies mentioned.